will the Mayor ensure that there are enough charging points for the black cab trade as they move on to being zero emission capable according to the Mayor's plan?
So hopefully I've sort of outlined some of the approach, which has been based first on research, and that research was involved direct feedback and input from cab drivers themselves in terms of their average mileage and their areas of use. That allowed us, having that research, to shape the initial program, which has the ambition of having, initially it had the ambition of having 150 by the end of 2018. I think we'll exceed that number now because, as I mentioned, further research that we subsequently did suggested we needed a higher level of deployment over the next few years. So, as Ollie's mentioned, we thought first of all, we did market research to say to charging providers, in terms of rapids for this market, what are the barriers that you face in coming into the market? And it wasn't for them that they didn't see a commercial interest in there. They struggled with access to the right sites and to the upgrades to the electricity network. So we've been using the money that we receive from the Office of Low Emission Vehicles to tackle those barriers. And that's why it's quite an innovative approach. We now have this commercial framework on which we have these 5 providers. We offer to them batches of ready to cook, if you like, sites that we have used our access and funding to make ready. And those sites are not only governed by what's available and what the boroughs are willing to make available, but also informed by that research as to where we know strategically, whether it's central London, on radial routes coming into London, key parts of outer London, where we need charge points. And now it's really exciting because we're really seeing that network beginning to take place. Just over the last couple of months, the number of rapid charge points is shot up. So I think we're at the beginning of this month, 64 charge points. It's likely to go to 70, 75 by the end of the month. 66, there you go. Just as I was thinking, yeah. So it's really very rapid now. So it took a while to get all of those different parts of the jigsaw puzzle to come together, but it is coming together now. We've been doing ongoing conversations, obviously, with the taxi trade over this period. And there's no secret that 12 months ago they were like, "Come on, where are the charge points?" Now they have been pleased by the progress, and those charge points are there ready for the zero emission cabs.
Okay, great. So you're saying 66 perhaps by the end of the month, 150 perhaps more by the end of this year, 300 by the end of 2020, perhaps more. And you did mention earlier 700 perhaps by the end of 2022.
Yeah, that's what. So there's a range within this world of uncertainty. There's a range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So our research would suggest it could be as much as 700, and we believe our delivery model is now fit for purpose to be able to reach that ambition.
Okay. How many of those rapid charging points are going to be reserved just for black cabs?
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Can you remember exact percentage?
So currently, Lily's correct. TfL have delivered 66. There are now about 90 in the capital in total, if you take into account some independent providers of rapid charge points. And at present, about 46 of those are currently dedicated to the taxi trade, of which many more will be as we start to roll out the remainder of the year and subsequent years.
So at the moment, about half of the 90 in total are for black cabs. But is that going to change? I mean, you mentioned, so 2022, 700 from TfL. There'll be more from private providers. But how many of those 700 would be reserved just for black cabs?
I don't think we want to put a number on that just yet. I think the important thing now is to see how the infrastructure we've put in is utilised, see the demand from the trade, talk to the suppliers and think about how they want that charge point to be used, and if it's being sufficiently used just by the taxi trade, then let's dedicate it. Is it in the right spot just for the taxi trade? So if you think about, there are sites in London at taxi restaurants, for example, where only taxi drivers can use them anyway, so of course they'll be dedicated. But I think this is about a negotiation with the trade, suppliers, and making sure the network's working for everyone.
That's why I'm asking the question, because I know people in the trade are very interested in, what your plans are specifically for them going forward. So, I mean, that was 2022, but I mean, you talk about the end of this year, there'll be 150. Can you say even by the end of this year that it will remain sort of a 50% will be just for taxis, or are you not sure for this year?
It's 90 was the original target, wasn't it, for taxis?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I
We
think-
can write and confirm, but so in terms of our initial estimates, I think 90 of the 150 was originally earmarked. But this is quite dynamic. We need to, so you can go and see the charge point on Southwark Street. I suspect when you go and see it, there won't be anyone charging in it. And that is a challenge if you're a commercial provider providing that infrastructure. We want these to be used to their max. We want people to be driving on electric if they're driving in London. And so we need to make sure that it wouldn't make any sense, all I'm saying, is to artificially ring fence charge points only for taxis if they're in locations where actually they could provide a multi-purpose. And so that's something we need to keep close eye and monitor in relation to their use.
The TX5 has only been available since the beginning of this month anyway, so so it's a new thing that was coming into this year. But how long is it 15 years that you're looking for all of the taxis to go to being zero emission capable, isn't it? Because it's a 15-year sort of cycle. There's a 15-year is the maximum that taxis are allowed. So this is going to be over a 15-year period from now until 2033. All of the taxis, you think, are going to gradually switch over to being zero emission capable. How many taxis every year do you see approximately going zero emission capable? I suppose that would be the number of taxis approximately divided by 15 every year. Probably
a different way of looking at it in terms of we need to get some quite short-term change. And that is why we have two forms of support and incentive really to instigate change within the market. So our air quality plans are premised on, and our ultra-low emission zone on achieving a change of around 9,000 taxis by 2020, isn't it? That's what we need to see.
That was an agreement with the trade.
Yeah, and the trade, supported that change. And that's why the delicensing fund, which enables, provides some funding for older taxis that are being taken out of licensing within London. And we've worked with the Office of Low Emission Vehicles to get a substantial top-up grant to help the purchase price towards the zero-emission capable cabs. Because we actually want some of this change, and we need this change early. We don't necessarily want it to drip, 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 drip over a long period of time, because we are breaching our NOx limits now, and we need to hit those targets.
So this is your £42 million fund, and that you see over the next 2 years, sort of funding the change for 9,000 or so taxis.
It will go beyond that, but that's part of it's a combination of measures. So it's the taxi being available, it's the rapid chargers being available, it's the delicensing fund being available, it's these top-up grants being available. Everything we're trying to address every element that would help that trade be able to legitimately make the change.
Do you think it's enough? Because the TX4 costs about 46,000. The TX5 costs about 65,000. So even if you take, you give taxi drivers 5,000, which is the maximum on the mayor's top-up fund, there's a 7,500 possibly extra coming to the government. So even with those, you reduce that from 65,000, you get the maximum possible support. It's still 52,500 for a taxi driver to purchase a new taxi. A TX5, up from 46,000 for a TX4. So it's going to be an extra 6,500 for a taxi driver, even with the maximum possible support. I mean, don't you need to do more financially for taxi drivers to incentivise them to go over to zero emissions capable?
I recognise that is a substantial investment. I would argue, though, and Ollie might want to add to it, that in terms of public investment, there has been substantial investment in there, because it's also the £18 million we're putting into the rapid charge network. The new electric vehicles is a great cab, but there will be other vehicles also coming onto the market. And as we've been talking about in terms of competition driving price with charging, I would imagine that will also take place within the taxi market as well. And there will be other alternatives, and that may...
Can you say anything more specifics about that, or is that just something that might possibly happen?
I'm not directly involved in those conversations, but my colleagues who work within the taxi field, they are having various conversations, and there are other...
you know what year that might happen?
Yeah, no, I think...
I think the company that's converting the Nissan van have stated their intention to bring it to market this year. I think we've also seen the Fraser-Nash sort of Metro cab vehicle trialled on London streets, and we understand that will be going into pre-production later this year. So I think once we've got a competitive market, it will challenge the cost of these vehicles. And I think we mustn't neglect the fuel savings that will be coming from these vehicles as well, which are considerable. And we're talking about, I think, over £100 a week potentially for a taxi driver to save. So it all has to come together. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of marrying the two together, because you want 9,000 taxis to change over the next 2 years, but that would need a much greater competition in that time to incentivise the taxi drivers to actually change their vehicles and not have to spend extra money on converting, because that is a big cost.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.